Welcome back, test subjects. Today we're switching things up. Instead of diving into another theory, we're going back into we theory's roots with a retrospective video. So if you're ready for that, get ready for some tests. So GLaDOS, she's a pretty dangerous murderous machine. I probably said that 1,000 times by now in my videos, but GLaDOS is much more than that. Much more. Her name itself tells us something important. GLaDOS stands for Genetic Life Form and Operating System. That first word, genetic, is something especially interesting, but we'll get back to that later. For now, let's talk about who GLaDOS is. Throughout both world games, she has complete control over the entire facility. Despite years of decay and destruction and abandonment, she still somehow manages to keep the tests and everything running. And the facility remains functional long after it should have collapsed. But GLaDOS is a very peculiar character in the first Portal game. We mainly know her as a sarcastic AI who constantly insults and manipulates us all the time. However, Portal 2 gives us a much deeper look into her character. One thing that has always fascinated me is, why does GLaDOS act the way she does? Why is she so cruel? Why does she continue testing? Why does she keep hurting those around her? The easy answer is that she's evil. But if we look deeper, I think that's entirely true. When GLaDOS is disconnected from the central core of Aperture and transformed into a potato battery, we see a completely different side of her. At first, she's still arrogant and dismissive, but sure, over time, she begins working alongside Chell. Sure, Chell's doing most of the work, but GLaDOS starts to rely on her. She even begins showing some glimpses of trust and empathy. For the first time in the series, GLaDOS forms something resembling a genuine connection with Chell. This makes it seem like she's finally changing. Maybe she's reflecting on everything she's done. Maybe she realizes the pain she's caused and deciding to become a better person. But then the ending happens. After regain control of Aperture, GLaDOS appears ready to let Chell go. For the most emotional moments in the game, she says, "Oh, thank God you're alright." For a brief second, we hear genuine concern in her voice. It sounds less like GLaDOS and more like Caroline, the human personality buried inside of her. And that's where things get tragic. Realizing that these emotions are making her vulnerable, GLaDOS deletes Caroline. She chooses to grow that part of herself that allows her to connect with others. Not because she hates Chell, but because maintaining the status quo is easier than changing. The facility must continue to operate. The tests must continue, no matter who gets hurt. Aperture must remain Aperture. After Chell leaves, GLaDOS is left alone once again. She eventually turns her attention back to testing with Alice and Peabody, the co-op bots. But never quite the same. Beneath her usual sarcastic attitude, there's a sense that she lost the only meaningful human connection she had. That's where Caroline becomes so important. According to Portal 2, Caroline was a respected Aperture Science employee, likely Cave Johnson's personal assistant, and one of the people he trusted most. From what little we know, she seems intelligent, capable, and genuinely dedicated to her work. Unfortunately, that trust may have led her to her downfall. Cave Johnson's health deteriorated. He became obsessed with defeating death. One of his final projects was creating an artificial intelligence capable of running Aperture once he was gone. When Cave himself was no longer to be uploaded into a computer, Caroline became the next candidate. Once she was forced into the robot, the result is GLaDOS. And imagine having your entire identity stripped away, trapped inside a machine for decades, slowly losing your humanity, while being given absolute power over an underground facility. It's no surprise that something went wrong. When you look back at GLaDOS through that lens, she's less of a villain, more of a tragedy. She's a person who's lost everything she once had. She once was and had. Spent years trapped in a system that encouraged her worst traits. That's an excuse for action. She's still responsible for countless terrible things, but does make for one of the most fascinating characters in gaming. She's not just a killer robot. She's the remains of Caroline buried beneath layers and layers of programming. Barrenness and years of isolation. And that's what makes her story so memorable. Anyways, that's all for this retrospective. If you enjoyed it, consider leaving a like, subscribe, or maybe even both. Thank you for watching Test Subjects, and as always, goodbye.